Hello, I have with me Jennifer Daks, who has been living with arthritis since she was a toddler and also works with me at Yoga for Arthritis. I'm so grateful for all of her work, and she also happens to have an incredible story that I would love for her to share with you all today. So Jen, why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about the very beginnings of your arthritis? I know you probably don't remember back to that, but what have you heard from your parents about how your arthritis emerged?
Sure. So I was diagnosed when I was 2.5. But before my diagnosis, it took about 6 months, I think, from what I'm told, for my parents to get the diagnosis of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So they say that I had been walking fine, and then slowly and gradually over time, I started to be a little bit more unsteady on my feet, and I had started to kind of grab onto the side of the bed or onto railings to be able to get myself up to walk, and eventually I just couldn't get out of bed. And my parents had been going to my pediatrician, and they had seen that my knees were swollen. That's the joint that I hear about most often. And that at first they thought maybe I had fallen down the stairs or bumped myself, or, you know, a normal kid. I had done something to hurt myself. But what made them concerned is that it just kept getting worse and worse. And without the tests or knowing necessarily how to diagnose, my pediatrician kind of had the sense that it was arthritis but couldn't make the diagnosis herself. So she had sent me out for testing at a specialist out in New York who had taken one look at me and pretty much said, yep, she's got juvenile rheumatoid arthritis.
And Jen, do you have any early memories of those doctor's visits, or do you remember being in pain or being different from the other kids in any way when you were very small?
Well, honestly, my first memories of my arthritis and treatment of my arthritis really don't come until later. I think it was maybe 5 or 6 when I can remember going to doctor's visits, and I always remembered hating them so much because my doctor would try to bend and straighten my knees, and I realized he was just checking my range of motion. But I just remember it hurting a lot. Or I remember distinctly I was on vacation with my parents, and to get me to take my medication, instead of giving me a whole pill, they would crush it up and put it into yogurt. So I remember this memory of being in a hotel living room and seeing my parents crush up my medicine to put in my yogurt. But you know, my mom tells me, though, I'm one of the lucky ones, because on the one hand, my severity of my disease is not is a milder form. I still have flares, which I can talk about later, but I was diagnosed very early on. I mean, within 6 months, and I had some residual effects for a little bit. I mean, my legs had started to grow at different rates because I had more severe arthritis in one knee, but that had corrected itself over time. I had a lift on my shoe, and I don't remember that very much, and I don't remember feeling very different as a young kid. Again, I can talk about that a little bit more, but where it really was more pronounced for me was when I was older, when I was a young adult, when I was 18, that I really felt the effects of my disease and being different.
Mm-hmm. So knowing a little bit about your story, I know that you had a lengthy period of remission in childhood, which isn't uncommon. So when did you go into remission, and when's the first time that you came out of it?
Mm-hmm. I went into remission when I was 7. So I had active flares from the time I was 2 until 7, and then went into remission from the time I was 7 until I was 18. And I think I told you this before, but lived like a normal kid. I mean, I was actually doing pretty intensive sports. I was doing gymnastics and cheerleading, and besides occasional aches and pains on rainy days and things like that, I felt like I was pretty normal. I mean, I always had a little bit heightened sense of my body and how I felt, but it never was something that held me back. And my mom had always talked to me about in the sense that, you know, don't let this be something to hold you back. So it's kind of I guess something that I internalized as like a mantra or something, that I do have arthritis, but it wasn't something that I wanted to hold me back. And to be honest, it was pretty easy when you're in remission to not let something hold you back. But when I was 18 was when it became really challenging.
So during that time that you were in remission, rainy days, did you notice that if you overdid it, if you pushed yourself too hard, that you would feel anything, or you were basically able to live like any other kid without consequences?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing some pretty intense stuff. If you ever watch gymnastics on TV or the Olympics, the tumbling that they do, it's pretty intense on the joints, but I never really felt effects of anything.
And then what happened when you were 18?
So when I was 18, I was going off to college. There was a lot of life changes happening. And I'd stopped doing cheerleading and gymnastics, so I had I had cut my activity level a lot. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had started to go into a flare maybe about 2 months after. Oh, no, that's not right. I had gone into a flare probably about a year after I had quit cheerleading. So I thought that it was just normal that I was getting a little sore and a little stiff because I wasn't as active. But what really started to get me is I started waking up in the mornings with a lot of pain, and kind of the same symptoms. I was barely able to get out of bed. My knees had swollen up so big. My fingers were so swollen I couldn't open bottle caps and open refrigerator doors. And I felt blindsided, I guess, because I didn't know that these were the effects of these were the signs, the warning signs of a flare, because it had been 11 years since I had my last flare, and I didn't remember what that was like when I was a kid.
So was there a moment when you realized, oh, this must be RA?
I'm trying to think back to when I really realized. I mean, I think it was probably just ongoing conversations between my mom and me. I mean, she could see it, and it was, I mean, when I really didn't remember what it felt like to have swollen joints. I mean, I could remember having aches and pains, but nothing to the point where it was debilitating and I couldn't walk. So probably when I couldn't get out of bed and I realized that my fingers were so swollen that I couldn't, open the refrigerator to get food, was when I said, okay, it's probably time to go back to the doctor now.
Go see a doctor.
And I can't deny this anymore, which is, I think something that I still see throughout my
and especially as a teenager, you're likely to feel a bit invincible and tend to ignore those kinds of things.
Right. And a lot of the things that I remember being able to do, I mean, that quote-unquote normal childhood that I had, it had pretty much gone away of what I was experiencing now. I mean, I was kind of getting ready to go off to college and do this special program at college. It was this hiking program, and I always loved hiking and being outdoors and doing active things. And all of a sudden, it just felt like things were kind of falling away. Like I couldn't go to this program. I couldn't go hiking or rock climbing because of my arthritis. I couldn't, my friends and I would spend the day in New York, and after 30 minutes of walking around, I was so exhausted I couldn't walk anymore. And it's hard to explain that to your friends when you're 18, because they kind of understand it, but they don't. And, I didn't want people feeling sorry for me, and it was uncharted water. I didn't know exactly.
Right. Well, they might understand it, but they certainly couldn't relate to it.
Right.
Right. In a way that older people who have had their own kinds of challenges physically and aches and pains might be able to relate, even if their experience isn't exactly the same.
Right. Right. And you had asked me before about overdoing it, and when I was in a flare, it's that idea of I don't want to let this hold me back, and that still was running through me, that I would try and push myself, and that didn't turn out well.
Well, there's a balance between being too overly cautious that you limit yourself and ignoring the limitations and overdoing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how long did it take to get the disease under control at that point? Were you in active disease for a while, or were you able to manage it through college?
Well, it's been, if you could see my hands right now, it's been kind of a roller coaster, maybe not is the right word, but it's been up and down. I've gone through periods where I've had more flares and I've been closer to remission, and once I got out of college, into full remission. So from the initial time that I went back on meds, I'd say it took about 4 or 5 months to get my arthritis under control. And you have to remember that I had pretty much grown up just almost forgetting that I had arthritis, not being on meds, not having to worry about this. And all of a sudden I felt like I was on this cocktail of medications, and, I still kind of wanted to be invincible, I guess. And so when I had started to feel better, I also said to myself, well, maybe I don't need to be on meds anymore. And, this is something I really advise people not to do, but, without the, I guess I should preface that first, but without the consent of my doctor, I had taken myself off of meds and just kind of wanted to do this a more natural way. And I was trying to do diet and acupuncture, and my symptoms were getting worse and worse and worse, and it was that denial, I think, that I was just telling myself, oh, it's not that bad, you're working through it, it'll get better, you don't need to be on the meds. And then at some point I had to surrender the white flag and say, all right.
Well, yeah, and also the challenge of going off of your medication unsupervised is that you could actually end up with some irreversible damage.
Right. Which I understand fully now. Yeah.
We do want to confirm to everybody that all of those other things you talked about can be helpful. Absolutely, staying active and eating a healthy diet and using other tools like acupuncture can bring about a lot of symptom relief, and even can be practiced on their own during periods of remission, if your doctor is in support of that. But they can also be complementary to whatever medication you have to use, which I think you've gone through a lot of phases with that.
Yeah.
How much of what kinds of tools are the right combination?
Sorry, are you asking me that, or you're just?
Well, Mike, actually, that's a good segue, because one of the tools that you use to manage your disease is yoga, right? So maybe talk a little bit about how you found yoga and what role it's played in your journey, in your management of the arthritis.
Sure. So I started practicing yoga when I was 18 during that first flare when I was an adult. My rheumatologist had actually suggested that I try a yoga class because, like I had said to you, I was on all of these medications, and I wanted to try something a little bit more natural, or try something in conjunction to just these meds, because I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to just be reliant on this. I want to feel like I'm doing something to change the state of my disease. So what I didn't know at the time was that there are so many different types of yoga. So when she said try yoga, I went to my local New York sports club and I took a gym class. And,
right.
you know,
Which I think is what a lot of people experience,
right.
is their first try at yoga, and then they think, oh, well, I can't, I must not be able to do this yoga stuff.
Right, right. And I remember specifically this one point of being in, I was in a child's pose and my knees were so swollen, and the teacher was saying, relax and let this be a restorative pose, and looking around and seeing everyone look so peaceful and inside being so frustrated and so angry and saying, why can't I just do this? Why me? Why do I have this? And so it was a long period, a couple of years, where I was trying hot yoga and vinyasa yoga and all of these different types of things, which I thought, this should work, this should help. And then maybe about 2 years later, I came to a studio in Baltimore where I was introduced to gentle yoga and props, and teachers were talking more about, if you feel pain here, you can try different things. And it was like the heavens opened up, and I had this aha moment where I was like, oh, there is a practice that I can do, and I can feel a sense of like I'm not excluded from things anymore, I guess is really what it felt like. And it's kind of neat that there was this about it must have been 22 or something. So maybe 4 years after my diagnosis, I was back in a class, and I was back in a child's pose, and I remember my knees were hurting. And this time, though, I was propped up, and I just started crying. And it was this, like, my body was in this similar state, but I could see that my mind and my experience were so different, and how much I had learned over the years. And, throughout college, I had gotten really interested in mindfulness and different approaches to complementary approaches to healing, which I talked a little bit about. And, it was. So
when you were crying, that second time when you were in the child's pose and you were propped up, what was going through your head, or what were you feeling that was emotional for you?
I felt like it was almost like a movie. Like I was seeing myself first diagnosed and trying my first yoga class. And then this montage of everything I had gone through, all of the struggle and all of the like heartache and why me and frustrations and changes that my body had gone through, and emotionally too. And then kind of this burst of, here you are now, and you still have so much further to go. And that really, that situations may look the same. And I can see this even years beyond even just that experience. I still take that understanding or that principle of there's so much growth that can happen within you.
It's being in a yoga pose, aside from whatever physical or energetic effects there might be directly, I have this idea that that there's a history to that pose, that there's a thousands-year-long history to people standing in that pose with that same intention. But what you're saying about child's pose, there's also a personal history to every pose. And when you come back into a pose that you have had a powerful experience in, it's like you can't put your foot in the same river twice.
Yeah.
It's the same river, but your experience of it is so very different because you've grown.
Yeah, it's so true. And I'm a yoga teacher, and whenever I teach quite a lot of gentle classes, and when I talk about poses, I talk a lot about the essence of a pose. And so I always say to my students, it's not about however you look, but for me, child's pose is this and it could be just from my experience or just the being of it, like going within and looking inside and kind of being really introspective. And that's the essence of the pose. And so it doesn't matter if you're, you can touch your heels with your bottom or you're all the, your chest is all the way down. It's about what does that mean for you? And that's,
right. And that's a powerful metaphor, too, that child's pose is grounding, and it's about surrender, too. And when you're thinking about your journey with your disease, there have been elements of introspection, of finding your stability, of a bit of surrender to the process and the experience of it.
Yeah. Since I was a child, I just had that thought while I'm on the phone with you. But yeah.
And also, even if I can share, in recent years, you've come up against new challenges in terms of the way that you think about flares, right?
Yeah, I thought that, I had gone back on medication and started to get more of my disease under control. And I thought, I'm feeling good. It had been back on my medication for maybe a year or so, maybe a year and a half. And in conjunction with my rheumatologist, we had started to taper off to the point where I was actually off of medication for about, I think it was 7 or 8 months. And I thought to myself, man, I've got this. Like, I figured it out. I've got a routine that works for me. And then all of a sudden, bam, another flare hit. And I couldn't really say to myself, I didn't know what the symptoms were. This was definitely more of it can't be arthritis. It's a denial thing. My ankles are swollen. Well, the interesting thing is that with rheumatoid arthritis, it's systemic, so it happens in different joints. And for me, I kind of refer to it as like joint tag, like which one's going to be next. So I had started to get swelling in my ankles, which I had never experienced or didn't remember experiencing. So that was the first thing to start to swell. And I started to think, oh, maybe it's just, something I did in, I do acro yoga, which is kind of acrobatics and yoga. So maybe I had landed weird. So maybe that's it. And then my elbow started to get stiff and swollen, and then the telltale sign was my knees. When my knees started to swell, it was like, okay, I know this is it. And it was that feeling of, what did I do wrong? I thought I got it, and it kind of, it grounds you back. For me, it was a learning in that this is something that's going to be with me for the rest of my life. And I may or I may not. I don't know if I'll ever fully be in remission for the rest of my life, but it's something that I have to learn to live with and deal with, and that I can change how I experience it. I can learn to accept it and carry it as a part of me. And I think in recent years, I've had a really big growth in actually being thankful that I have this disease, that I have arthritis, that I've been able to have the experiences that I do, that I can relate to people who have pain, and at such a young age too. I think it's given me life experience that I never would have had. But there are still challenges within those flares.
Right.
So I'm not sure if you want me to bring it up or you should, but working with you when I had this flare was even challenging in and of itself, because not that working with you was the challenge, but that I had gotten to the point where I could work for maybe an hour or two, and then I'd get so fatigued and so tired that I needed to sleep for another 2 hours and rest my body. And even working with the founder of Yoga for Arthritis, who's studied this all of these years, I was even scared to tell you that I needed some time. And when I called you, I had told you I'm really nervous to tell you this and that I needed to take things a little slower. And you had just said to me, who am I and what do we do? But it was a really big struggle to even do that. And, I'm thankful that I am in the position that I am, because I don't think a lot of people are. I mean, I was talking to somebody who was a lawyer, and I had said this, and her comment was, it's great that you have that job. So I know it's really hard for some people. Yeah.
So do you feel like because of the arthritis that your maturation has been different?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe relative to your peers?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I am kind of that old soul in a young body. I mean, I remember when I was 18 feeling like I was 85 years old. And I don't know, maybe it's because of my arthritis, but I get along really great with senior citizens, with older adults, and I love them and I love hanging out with them. But no, I think it's given me a lot of it's allowed me to be quite introspective and given me a lot of perspective, but also relate and have conversations with older people who are going through this too. And for me, it's been a bridge, like a generation bridge, to be honest, to have people look at me and say, oh, you're so young and you're so fit, you don't understand about what it is. And when I say, I bet you wouldn't guess that I have arthritis, and there are some days where I can't get out of bed. And it opens up communication. So for me, it's been this teacher of communicating with myself and learning not to deny parts or push parts away from myself, and learning to uncover things within me, but then also opening up communication with other people too who are experiencing such struggles and hardship. And maybe it's not arthritis, but I feel like I can understand pain and hardship a little bit better.
It makes me think, Jen, that aging is going to be a piece of cake for you.
Like I've already done it. Maybe, I joke about that sometimes, because my boyfriend has also had, low back issues, and he's had various knee issues and things like that. And so I say to him, maybe we've just got it all out when we're young. Aging is going to be a piece of cake.
Well,
so it's good that you're confirming that.
Yeah, but the perspective that you have on what it means to have an able body, or to have pain, or to have physical challenges or limitations, that's something that a lot of people don't confront until they're much older. And what you've been through, I'm sure, gives you a very different perspective on what's to come in terms of your changing body.
And, that's another part where I think I'm grateful for, is that I hear a lot of people who are starting this journey now. They're in other young adults who get their first flare when they're 18 or 20 or in their 30s, or older adults who are experiencing pain and other ailments. And it's this surprise, kind of, not a good surprise, but that I've had 24 years to learn to accept this. And, while it hasn't been the worst that it has been, to the point where I can remember until I was 18, I've had this introduction to it. And it's been this gradual process of reestablishing, you're right, what it means to have an able body. And I'll tell you, I still forget what it feels like to be in a flare. When I'm in remission, it still like knocks me off of my feet sometimes. It's like, what does that feel like? Oh, right. So there is this kind of distancing that I still feel sometimes when I'm in remission. I try to call back what it feels like, and I think that it lessens the blow a little bit when each time that I have another flare.
That's interesting, because I've also heard people say the opposite, that when they're in a flare, they forget what it feels like to not have pain.
Yes, well, that's true as well. You just get amnesia on both sides.
Yeah.
So it hits you from both directions. Well, yes, because it's so all-consuming. I mean, when you think about that, I can literally only do something for an hour, and that's really great. I mean, that's a good day on a good flare, but it's not just the physical aspect. It's the emotional toll and the physical toll and even sometimes the existential toll. Why is this happening, and what does this mean? And I've been lucky to. There's still a pride in me, I think, in not in wanting to still be able to do what I am normally able to do. That mantra that I think has carried me through, to never let arthritis hold me back. But I think I'm fortunate in being able to reach out and ask for help. That hasn't necessarily been something that has been a struggle. It's just when I feel like I need to step off of, I guess, responsibilities that I have. But I have, a support system is one of the best things you can do, whether it's a friend who really understands, or a parent, or a supportive boss.
And that gets into the philosophy of yoga, right? Being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Recognizing those early signs and not being in denial about it, and
right.
Being able to rely on support that's available to you, literally in terms of props and tools, but also emotionally and
And I think it's the
socially.
Philosophy which carries you through, which is that for me has been the driving force. That is, the physical postures help, and it helps keep my joints lubricated and moving, and it takes away some stiffness. But it's the philosophy that I use even when I'm not in a flare. It's the breathing techniques that I have to remember. Well, it's the philosophy that reminds me to breathe, that this is your yoga practice, so breathe.
Right.
Even if this is all you can do, that's enough. And that is amazing in and of itself. And beyond that, learning about clearing and creating space, and like you said, being honest and looking at yourself, and something I'm still doing.
Right. Well, and unfortunately, I think, there's so many, particularly in the West, where yoga has become more of a form of exercise and maybe stress management, that a lot of people never even get to the philosophy.
Yep.
And particularly for people who are struggling and suffering and in pain, what an incredible toolbox to be able to have a different perspective.
Yep. I can't tell you, for myself and the people that I talk to, when they have that realization that yoga is so much beyond just the physical practice, it's like it's like you open this door to a whole new world. And they realize, maybe I actually have been practicing yoga and not even knowing it. And all these years, because that's part of having pain and arthritis is so much about feeling about what you have to let go or what you can't do. And I think that having this root in philosophy to revitalize that, it gives you something to feel like you actually still can do. Because as long as you're here, you can believe in something. And
so, Jen, you were talking a little bit about the existential piece and those questions that have come up for you in terms of, why am I here, and why do I have this, the why me, why now, all of that. Do you have different answers for that, or any answers for that at this point in your life?
Well, I think I think I'm still young, and I'm still figuring it out. I mean, my life has taken so many different turns just in the past, I don't know, 6, 7 years. I mean, when I started college, I was really interested in working with older adults in psychotherapy because I just felt so connected with them. And then my path has turned more to focus on relationships. And I was talking about how I think that my arthritis has opened up this idea of relationships both within myself and to other people. And, you know, somewhere along that line, I started working with yoga for arthritis and starting to teach teachers how to teach this. So I know this happened for a reason, and I was put on this earth to do something. What that exact vision is, I'm not sure, but I think it'll be some kind of, you know, combination of all of those things and maybe some other things sprinkled in. And check back in with me in 10 years and we'll see where I'm at. Maybe I'll have found something.
Your journey with arthritis is an important foundation from which you will serve, or, you know, from which you're already serving, right?
Yeah. If
I can put words in your mouth.
You can certainly put words in my mouth. Of course. I mean, like I said, I'm grateful I have it, and I can't imagine a life without it.
Well, Jen, it's such an honor and a pleasure to talk with you. Your story is so incredibly inspiring, and the place you are in your journey at such a young age is quite remarkable. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.